My name is Ethan, and I have kept this story locked inside my chest for almost 2 years now. Tucked behind my ribs like a folded letter I was too afraid to mail, but secrets have a weight to them. They press on you in quiet moments. When the house is still, and the only sound is the ceiling fan turning slow circles above your bed. So I am going to tell you everything. From the beginning, because the beginning matters more than people think. I was 23 when my family decided to sell the old house in Maplewood. It was my grandmother's house. Technically, a wide, cream-colored colonial with a wraparound porch and a yard that backed up against a small grove of oak trees. My grandmother, Nana Rose, had passed away 8 months earlier, quietly in her sleep. The way people who have lived good lives sometimes do. She left the house to my mother and my Aunt Patricia in equal shares, and after months of careful, loving argument about what to do with it, they agreed to sell. But before the real estate agent could schedule showings, someone had to go through Nana Rose's things. That someone ended up being me and my cousin Marcus. Marcus was 26. He was Aunt Patricia's only son, tall, broad-shouldered. The kind of person who walked into a room and immediately knew where the light switches were. He had played college football on a partial scholarship, graduated with a degree in kinesiology, and now worked as a personal trainer at a gym in the city about 40 minutes from where I lived. He was charming in the easy, uncomplicated way that some people are born into, the kind of charm that never had to practice itself. Women loved him. He had dated steadily since he was 16. Always with someone beautiful on his arm, always easygoing about it. Never cruel, but never quite serious either. We had grown up close, Marcus and I, closer than most cousins. Probably because we were only 3 years apart and had spent nearly every summer of our childhoods at Nana Rose's house together. We had built forts in those oak trees. We had caught fireflies in mason jars and let them go before bed because Nana Rose said it was wrong to keep beautiful things trapped. We had stayed up past midnight playing video games on the old television in the basement while the adults talked upstairs. And we had whispered to each other in the dark about the things we wanted to be when we grew up, but we had drifted. The way cousins do when childhood ends and real life begins. I had gone to art school in Philadelphia. Marcus had gone to state school on his athletic scholarship. We texted on birthdays and liked each other's photos online and showed up at family holidays with the comfortable, slightly distant warmth of people who once knew each other very well and still carried. The shape of that knowing, even when the details had blurred the last time I had seen him before that summer, was at Nana Rose's funeral. We had stood at the gravesite in our dark clothes, and he had put his arm around my shoulders without saying anything, and I had been grateful for it in a way I couldn't quite explain. So when my mother called and asked if I could drive up to Maplewood for 2 weeks to help sort through Nana Rose's belongings, I said yes, without hesitation. And when she mentioned that Marcus would be there too, that Aunt Patricia had asked him to help as well, I felt a small, uncomplicated gladness about it. I did not think anything of it. It was just Marcus. I arrived on a Friday afternoon in late June, when the heat was the kind that sits on your skin like a second shirt. I pulled into the driveway and sat in my car for a moment, looking at the house. It looked the same as it always had, the white paint slightly faded, the porch swing still hanging at its familiar angle, the rose bushes along the front walk that Nana Rose had tended every season, but there was something different about it now. Some quality of emptiness that wasn't in the paint or the wood, but somewhere deeper. Like the house itself was aware that she was gone. Marcus's truck was already in the driveway. I found him in the kitchen, standing at the counter with a glass of water, wearing a gray t-shirt and basketball shorts, looking almost exactly as I remembered him except that his shoulders were somehow wider and there were a few more lines around his eyes. He turned when he heard me come in, and his whole face opened up into that easy smile. He said. He had called me that since we were kids. Just the letter. Man, look at you, I said. And we did that thing that men do when they haven't seen each other in a long time. A handshake that pulled into a brief, back-patting hug. You eat? He asked, already moving toward the refrigerator. I stopped at the grocery on the way in. "There's sandwich stuff." "Good," I said. I ate on the road. We stood in Nana Rose's kitchen in the late afternoon. Light came through the yellow curtains she had hung above the sink 30 years ago, and it felt strange and good and a little bit heartbreaking to be there without her. We talked icily, the way we always had, catching up on the months between us, talking about work and the drive up and what needed to be done in the house. My mother had left us a detailed list: the bedrooms, the attic, the basement, the garage. 2 weeks' worth of careful sorting. Marcus had claimed the small guest room at the end of the hall. I took my old room, the one with the blue walls that Nana Rose had painted for me this summer. I was 8 because I had told her blue was my favorite color, and she had taken that seriously. That first night, we ordered pizza and sat on the porch swing, eating it while the fireflies came up out of the grass. I thought, this is good. This is exactly what I needed. Just something familiar. Just a little piece of the past. I did not know yet what the next 2 weeks were going to do to me. We fell into a routine quickly. The way people do when they are sharing space and work. We woke up around 7. Marcus made coffee strong, black, the way our grandmother had always made it, and I made toast. We divided the rooms between us and worked through the mornings in a companionable, easy quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists between people who are genuinely comfortable with each other. Sometimes we'd call out across the hallway if we found something worth sharing: an old photograph, a piece of Nana Rose's costume jewelry, a letter from the 1970s. Sometimes we'd carry things to the dining room table and sort them together, deciding what to donate, what to keep for the family, what was to warn to pass on in the afternoons. When the heat was at its worst, we'd take a break. Marcus would do his workout. He had brought resistance bands and a jump rope. In the backyard, while I sketched in the shade of the porch, I was an illustrator by trade, freelance work mostly, book covers and editorial pieces, and the occasional children's book. I always had a sketchbook with me. Drawing was how I processed the world. In the evenings, we cooked together, simple things, pasta and grilled chicken, and we sat at Nana Rose's table and talked. It was in those evening conversations that I started to understand that Marcus was not quite the person I'd assumed he still was. He was thoughtful, more thoughtful than the easy, breezy Marcus of our childhood. He asked real questions and then actually listened to the answers. He talked about his work with a kind of quiet seriousness I hadn't expected. Not just the training sessions, but the why of it. The way he'd gotten into working with people who had chronic pain or recovering from injury. The satisfaction of watching someone reclaim their own body. He talked about his mother with tenderness. He talked about feeling somewhere in his mid-20s that he had coasted on surface things for too long and that he was trying now to go deeper in his life. He didn't explain exactly what he meant by that, but he said it with the gravity of someone who meant it. I liked him. I liked who he had become. I found myself looking forward to those evenings in a way that surprised me a little, and I was careful about that. I want to be honest with you about that, because honesty is the whole point of this story. I was careful because I knew something about myself that I had kept. For most of my life, in the same locked place where I now keep this story, I am gay. I had known it since I was 14. Recognized it the way you recognize a word you have heard before but never seen written down, something clicking into alignment. The shape of a thing finally matching its name. I had come out to my closest friends in college, then carefully to my parents, who had responded with the particular careful love of people who were trying very hard to get it right. I had not come out to the wider family, not to my aunts and uncles and cousins. It felt like too large a project, too many individual conversations, too much potential for things to go sideways. I told myself I'd do it eventually. Eventually kept moving ahead of me like the horizon. Marcus did not know, and Marcus was straight. That was simply a fact, as plain and architectural as the walls of the house we were staying in. I had watched him date women my entire life. I had heard him talk about women the way straight men talk about women. It's casually and warmly and without complication, so I was careful. I kept the window of my feelings correctly shut. He was my cousin. He was straight. Whatever warmth was growing in those evening conversations was simply the warmth of rediscovering someone you had missed. That was all it was. I was capable of enjoying his company without making it into something else. I was a grown adult. I had managed my own interior life for years. I was very confident about all of this. It was the end of the first week when things began to shift. We had spent the day in the attic, which was the most difficult part of the house, not because of the volume of things, but because of the density of memory. Every box we opened was 30 or 40 years of someone's life. Nana Rose had kept everything: birthday cards, children's drawings, old report cards. The wedding programs from every family wedding since 1974. We worked slowly, stopping often, reading things aloud to each other, and laughing, and sometimes going quiet in the particular way that grief asks you to by late afternoon. We were both exhausted and a little emotionally wrung out in the way that handling the past will do to you. Marcus sat back against a box and looked up at the single bulb hanging from the attic ceiling and let out a long breath. "I miss her," he said. "Just that." "Me too," I said. We sat with that for a while. The light through the attic's small window was going golden and soft. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Yeah. Are you happy? Like in your life? Are you actually happy?" I looked at him. It was an unexpected question, the kind that comes from a particular kind of tiredness, the kind where the usual social filters get thin. "Some days," I said honestly, "more than I used to be." He nodded slowly. "What changed?" "I stopped pretending about some things," I said. I chose the words carefully, but I chose them honestly. He looked at me for a moment, and I couldn't read his expression exactly. It was thoughtful, searching. "I think I'm still figuring that out," he said. "The pretending thing." "What do you mean?" He shook his head slowly, looked back up at the light bulb. "Nothing. Never mind. Let's go make dinner." I let it go. But I held the thread of it in my mind, turning it over quietly. 2 days later, I was sitting on my bed after dinner, a sketchbook open in my lap, when my phone lit up with a message. It was from a friend back in the city, a friend named Joel who knew me well, who knew all the things about me I kept quiet from my family. He was checking in, asking how the house sorting was going. We texted back and forth for a while, the easy conversation of close friends. At some point, I told him about Marcus. Not in any loaded way, just that it had been unexpectedly good to reconnect. That Marcus was different than I remembered, that I was enjoying the evenings. Joel, who knows me probably better than I know myself sometimes, responded with a single line, "Ethan, be careful with your heart, okay?" I started typing back a response, something dismissive and reassuring, when I heard a knock at my door. "Yeah," I called. The door opened, and Marcus leaned against the frame. He had showered, hair still slightly damp, and he was holding 2 bottles of beer by their necks. He lifted them slightly, the universal offer. "You busy?" "No," I said, setting the phone down. "Come in." Came in and handed me one of the beers, and sat in the old armchair in the corner of the room. The blue armchair that had always been there, that I had read in as a child. He looked around the room at the blue walls, at the drawings I had tacked up over the week, quick sketches of the house, of the oak trees in the backyard, of the porch. "These are really good," he said, looking at the drawings. "Thank you. I always forgot you could do that," he said. "Draw like that." "I mean, I knew you were an artist, but seeing it is different. It's just how I see things," I said. "Drawing helps me understand what I'm looking at." He took a slow drink of his beer and looked at one of the sketches, a quick portrait I had done from memory of Nana Rose, sitting in her chair on the porch. He looked at it for a long time. "That's exactly her," he said quietly. "Yeah," he was quiet for a moment. "Then, can I tell you something?" "Of course." He turned the beer bottle in his hands, looking down at it. Something in his posture had changed. The easy looseness of him had tightened slightly. Something more careful and deliberate in it. "I haven't been okay," he said. "For a while now. I don't really tell people that. But I haven't been." I stayed quiet, giving him the room. "I think I've been I've been living a version of my life that was mostly for other people, he said slowly. Like the choices I made, the way I showed up, what I let people see. I've been doing this thing where I build the version that everyone expects, and then I just live inside it, even if it doesn't fit. What doesn't fit? I asked carefully. He looked up from the bottle and met my eyes, and there was something in his expression that I had never seen there before. Something careful and frightened and also somehow relieved. Like a door he had been holding shut for a long time was pressing open against his hands, and he was finally, slowly letting it. I don't know yet, he said. I think I'm still figuring it out. He said it exactly the way he had said the pretending thing in the attic. And I understood that both sentences were pointing at the same territory. I didn't push. Some things need to arrive in their own time. That's okay, I said. You don't have to know yet. He looked at me for a moment. How did you figure it out? The pretending thing you mentioned. I took a breath. Slowly, I said. And then all at once were you scared? Terrified, I said. And then much, much less scared than I'd been while I was hiding it. He held my gaze. The room was very quiet. Outside, the night sounds of the yard, the crickets, the distant frogs, came through the window. I should let you sleep, he said. He stood up, finished his beer, set the bottle on the dresser. Thanks for talking. Any time, I said. Really, any time. He left. I sat in the blue room for a long time afterward, not drawing, not on my phone, just sitting with the feeling of a conversation that had been about one thing on the surface and something much larger underneath. And I told myself carefully, firmly, that I was reading nothing into it, that Marcus was going through something personal, something that had nothing to do with me. That being a good cousin meant being a safe person for him to talk to. That was the beginning and end of my role in this. I was still very confident. I told myself this quite frequently. The second week was different in a way I can only describe as atmospheric. The way the air changes before a storm. It's not in temperature, but in pressure. The same routine, coffee and toast, the rooms, the sorting, the afternoon break, the evenings. But something between us had loosened, or deepened, or both. We talked more easily about real things. He asked about my friendships, my life in the city, the work I cared most about. I asked about his family, his plans, what he wanted his life to look like. We talked about Nana Rose, really talked about her, the specific and particular ways she had shaped us, and sometimes we just sat in the same room without talking, reading or sketching or scrolling through our phones, and it was the most comfortable silence I had experienced in years. I will admit to you now, falling. Slowly, carefully, against my own explicit instructions to myself. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a thunderclap. It was a slow filling up. The way a glass fills when you hold it under a tap, gradual, steady. And then suddenly you notice it's full and you don't quite know exactly when that happened. On Tuesday of the second week, we were working through the last of the boxes in the basement. It was late afternoon and warm even down there, and we had been at it for hours. I was kneeling on the floor going through a box of old books when Marcus, from across the basement, said my name in a strange tone. Ethan. Yeah. Come look at this. I crossed the basement to where he was standing, holding a small wooden box, the kind with a latch, meant for keepsakes. He had it open, and inside, carefully preserved, were letters. Old letters, thin paper, handwriting that looped and tilted with age, and to photographs. I picked up one of the photographs. It showed two young men, maybe 19 or 20, standing close together in front of what looked like a lake. They were smiling at the camera with the particular brightness of people who were happy and know it. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, Thomas and me, Lake Carver, 1962, Marcus and I looked at each other. Is that? He started. I don't know, I said. We took the letters upstairs to the kitchen table and sat down with them. They were not Nana Rose's handwriting. They were written to her from someone named Thomas. And they were love letters. Careful, beautiful, aching love letters from the early 1960s. Full of the language of longing and secrecy and the particular pain of loving someone in a world that does not have room for what you feel. But there was something else. Tucked between the letters was a single page in Nana Rose's handwriting, addressed to no one. The kind of writing you do for yourself. She had written about Thomas, about a young man named Thomas who had been her closest friend's companion, who had sat at her kitchen table every Sunday, who had taught her how to make apple cake. She wrote about how much she had loved him, in the way you love someone who is kind and true. She wrote about attending his funeral in 1987. She wrote, "I kept his letters because he trusted me with them. And I want them to be found someday by someone who needs to know that this kind of love has always existed, has always been real and good and worthy." Marcus sat very still across the table from me. I looked up from the letter, and his face was doing something I had never seen it do, something open and undone, not quite crying, but very close. "She kept them on purpose," he said quietly. "Yeah," I said, "she did. Because she knew someone would need to find them." That's what she wrote. He looked at the photograph again, the two young men at the lake. "Smiling into the sun of 1962? Someone like me," he said. And there it was. The door finally open. I sat very still. I breathed.